of white supremacy. We'll give folks some few minutes to log on, get folks on Periscope, Twitch, Facebook, all the places. We're picking up viewers right now. I think that I fixed the comments, so we'll be able to see your comments live and be able to respond to you live. I'm back here with Aaron, and we're going over the pillar of white supremacy. We've been doing this about every week, once a week, but last week was my birthday, so I had to celebrate.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday.
It was a great birthday, and I'm still recovering from staying up till 1 a.m. with Anna Galladay and Aaron and Darren Jackson. Okay, we've got a few of y'all online and very excited to see y'all. We're talking about defensiveness tonight and the ways in which defensiveness shows up in our bodies, in our actions, in our organizing, and what the antidote might be. I'm curious if any of y'all feel defensive when we start talking about race.
Or if we just say the word defensiveness, like, let's just take a moment and let that land in your soma.
I'm also drinking my wine so I can get through the wine. Oh, look, we can see the comments. Great. Thank you. Keep the comments coming.
Hi, Leonard. Good to see you.
Just drinking my German wine that my friend at the...
It's called Pfluger.
Mm-hmm. It's a Riesling.
Yes.
So we're drinking white during the summer, red in the winter. But defensiveness. Let's get back on topic.
Well, while a few more people join us, I'm just wanting to begin this little discussion asking you how you are today. How do you feel? How's your body? What's your mood?
Yeah. It's a great question because I have not been sleeping well. And I would have this twilight sleep where I would like fall asleep but then wake up and be awake from like 2 until 5, and I would like watch the sunrise. You would be sleeping next to me. And I was so jealous that you were getting this good sleep. And last night I had the most amazing sleep. And I believe in a good 12-hour sleep because my beauty rest depends on it. So I had really good 12-hour sleep, and I just am in a good mood. I've been productive. I've been on calls all day. I had like this fantastic 2-hour call. I also had a call with Kevin Miguel Garcia. Go follow his work.
Hey, Kevin.
We're doing we're planning some cool stuff. I feel good today. I feel good. How do you feel?
Yeah. So today was really... there was a lot of activation in my nervous system, just around a few different things. And, you know, I'm glad to have the resources to be able to root myself back into the present moment. And, you know, to just be able to drop into my body and check in. And you know what, after we had we had a little bit of a tense dinner conversation, you and me. And then it, like, as we pushed into it further, things started to sort of soften, and I feel like we really got to see each other. And so, you know, I'm a relational being. I mean, we all are, but that's sort of what does it for me in life. And so just to have kind of a sense of harmony in that you're singing one note and I'm singing another, but they're together.
Just so everyone knows, when I try to sing, I'm always off key.
Not always.
The fact that you say that we're in harmony is amazing. Also, hi, Becca Epley. Good to see you.
Hi, Becca. So good to see you. Well, you know, harmony can include discord.
Yes, I love it.
I think I got that from Tada Hazumi.
Yes.
So shout out to Tada.
Also, go follow Tada Hazumi's work. He's amazing. The Selfish Activist is his blog, doing some amazing work.
He and Dare Sohei. And they also have a podcast, which is amazing. Yep. Okay, so thank you. I just wanted to check in because I think that sometimes we think that this work is just about intellectualizing and talking about the work, and the humans that are doing it get left behind. And I just feel like it's really important to have just, a check-in and to let folks see our humanity.
Well, and you mentioned that we had a tense conversation. We were actually talking about our cultural differences, and and we were talking about. I always talk about togetherness and being en conjunto, and that is something that I don't see in white culture. And being en conjunto, I just there's a sense of belonging that I have when I'm with my Latino family. Like places like HTI, the Hispanic Theological Initiative, there is something palpable about being with Latinos that I don't experience with white folks. And so we were talking about this, and you actually expressed you a flavor of that from your dance career, which is really great to compare and contrast ways of belonging in different cultural pods. So
all right, y'all, let's take a deep breath together.
I'm gonna drink my wine too. Wine helps everything, I think.
Oh my goodness. So tonight we're just sort of moving in order of this document that we have, that is just, we're so thankful that Tema, I'm actually not sure how to pronounce that. Tema Okun and Kenneth Jones, is it? Let's get their names right. Yep, Kenneth Jones. They co-wrote this document in 2001, and it's been circulating around in the movement and in just sort of different justice circles, and it has really resurfaced in the context of the recent uprisings. And I think that it's this really beautiful tool that we can use to see where we are. It's like a little litmus test to just sort of drop into like, how do we participate in these things? How have we internalized these things? And where maybe don't we see these things in our lives? And by talking about them and sort of bringing them out into the atmosphere, into the air, we're trying to just normalize it, if that makes sense. So just sort of to be able to not keep it behind hidden doors, which is where I think supremacy culture would prefer it stayed. And by naming these things and talking about how they show up, and then also practicing, if we can, and naming the antidotes to these things, we might be able to, the more we do this, as Resma Medicum says, in like 3 to 10 years, we might be able to shift culture in like a real tangible way. So that's sort of the context of what we're doing here. So we're going to be talking about defensiveness.
Can we just review what we've already discussed?
Sure. Yeah.
So people can go to YouTube and find those conversations.
Yeah.
We talked about perfectionism. We talked about a sense of urgency.
That's all we've done.
And now we're talking about defensiveness. Yeah.
So we're on the third one.
We're on the third one. Third pillar. There are so many pillars to white supremacy. Did y'all know that?
That's why it's really held on.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of what keeps it rolling.
Yeah.
And the other thing that keeps it rolling is that nobody talks about it. And nobody takes the time to feel into that, and that there might be another way of or set of ways of doing things.
And as we get into this, one of the questions I have been holding as a white Latinx and working with predominantly white folks to help them connect the dots is, what is the work for white folks right now? And I think this understanding the cultural system that white folks have been socialized into, conscripted into, is, I think, part of the work for white people. And I feel very privileged to work with white people. I feel like it's part of my call and vocation to journey with white folks. Aaron kids me all the time that I tried to give up white folks, but we met and I fell in love, and I haven't given up on white folks.
Yeah.
But I think that one of the things that I learned recently is that we are not just talking about a black and white problem. We are not talking about a 2-lane highway. This is a multi-lane movement highway. And so there is lots of room for people to get involved. And our lane with the Activist Theology Project, and I think here in Nashville, is helping white folks connect the dots to this cultural phenomenon that we call white supremacy. So,
yeah. So, defensiveness. I'm going to read this. There's an updated version of this thing floating around, and I'm not sure if it's meant to be shared publicly. I don't really know, but I have access to it. And so I wanted to share with you, and then maybe we'll dig into this other document that's a little bit older. And so this is a sort of shorter way to talk about defensiveness and how it shows up in terms of white supremacy. So the first little phrase is nowhere to air grievances.
That, like, there's not a process to, like, it's a pressure cooker.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. And with this one, y'all, this is going to take a little bit of like finagling. I think we need to like tease this apart because I don't know that I fully, grasp everything here.
Well, if you think about white culture, and the ways in which the tentacles of supremacy culture are interlaced with white culture, there is no room to do anything other than the thing itself of supremacy.
So what I hear in that is that there's not a way to there's not permission to adapt when,
or as the podcast that we've both been on, there's not permission to be. That's a shout out to Permission to Be podcast
to Becca and Tommy and David.
Yeah, go check out that podcast. They're doing some amazing work. But I think that this permission to be who you are, there is no room for that. I think in
this
framework.
To air a grievance would be to say, hey, there's been an injustice and that's not sitting right with me. Can we talk about that? And the response is no, we can't. Defensiveness would say no. We can't. There's no room for that.
So it shuts it down.
It shuts it down.
Which is what happens a lot of times when the race conversation comes up. It gets shut down. Right? We don't talk about that in public.
Yeah. Right.
We privatize those conversations within our nuclear family. And let me just say, when I was talking with Kevin Garcia earlier, we both had this critique of the nuclear family as a tool of white supremacy. That there is this idea of the family is supposed to be contained in a certain way where you work out all your business. But that's actually that's a myth. It's actually not real.
Because how else would you do it in community, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And the process of naming a grievance wouldn't be private.
Right.
Yeah, it wouldn't be this thing that just has to be kept between or behind closed doors.
Well, and let me just say that, this is Monday, and I guess
it's Tuesday.
It's Tuesday. It's Tuesday. I guess it was on Friday that I posted the article about Robyn DeAngelo.
Oh yeah.
And it was from a conservative source, but the point of posting it was, what should white people be doing in this moment?
And can we just say to the people, in case they don't know what it's about, can you just give a quick little...
So the article that I posted, so Robyn DeAngelo is an author and a scholar. I think she's trained as a sociologist, lives in the Pacific Northwest, and wrote a book titled White Fragility. And the premise of the article that I posted, and there was a New York Times article about Robyn DeAngelo.
Right.
There's been lots of talk. The premise of the article is that to whom is Robyn accountable? That there's no trace of accountability. That financial accountability. That she's doing anti-racist work, but there's no trace of the deep relationships she's fostered, some that's been scrubbed from the internet and whatnot. And so I posted it as an opportunity for us as people who care about becoming anti-racist to really ask the question, what is the work of white folks? Mm-hmm. I got a lot of defensiveness. Over 70 comments. A lot of them were defensive.
Yeah. Yeah, and
because I was airing dirty laundry.
Right.
And white culture doesn't do that.
And I want to also bring to the table a different perspective on that, you know, we learn as white people in a white culture, we learn to be defensive. We learn to keep the power structures in place the way they are through our defensiveness. So in some ways, you know, I don't blame the white people who responded defensively. They've learned that behavior and they are doing what they think is best. Mm-hmm. And there comes a certain point where that behavior is no longer warranted and it's no longer serving you, mm-hmm. right? Because there's something when we get defensive, what happens? It's because why do we get defensive? Because there's something to protect. Mm-hmm. And when we have a sense that there's something to protect, we've got to put up a hard edge, a boundary like this, mm-hmm. right? And I'm putting my hand out like, you stay there because all this in here, it can't handle what you're
because it's fragile.
Bringing. Because it's soft or it's fragile or it's a wound that hasn't healed. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different ways we can talk about defensiveness, right? So I just wanted to bring that perspective in and say, these are all of these things these are things that we've learned, and maybe that even served us and helped, maybe if you're white and you're listening to this, helped you advance, helped you have an advantage to a certain degree. And now it's time to look at how maybe these things haven't served you, and they certainly haven't served cultures that are oppressed or bodies that are oppressed around you.
I just want to go to the comment here that we have, because I think it's salient that we have a comment here that says that basically this person has no say because they've not lived it. And the ways that we shut down people, you know, cancel culture is alive and well right now. The ways that we shut down people because of an assumed lived or non-lived experience. You know, I talked a lot about pain today in one of my calls. We live with great cultural pain.
Yes.
And when we say to people, you don't have a right to talk about race or becoming anti-racist because you've not lived it, I think that we are doing more damage and more separation and more cultural pain. What happens when we actually invite people into the conversation?
Right.
Because defensiveness, you know, white supremacy is not just impacting white people.
Exactly.
And so when people of color, black people, indigenous people, when there is defensiveness, we always have to ask ourselves, is this internalized white supremacy?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Or is this defensiveness warranted?
Mm-hmm. What am I trying to protect?
Right.
Does it need to be protected?
Right.
Yeah. Does it need to be protected? And I would just add, you know, the message I'm getting from I'm in the process of multiple trainings, learning from different online sources, and one of them is generative somatics. One of them is you know, just some online opportunities to learn from Resma Menachem, whose work I would just really encourage you to check out, is that, you know, white folks, and me, I am included in this so hard.
And I am included in this because I have been socialized into whiteness.
Right. But what I'm saying is white folks, and yeah, you actually are included in this. We want to leave other white folks behind who don't have the same analysis as us and haven't read the same books and don't know, right? And then the fact is, like, to me, that's unacceptable, and that is playing into cancel culture, where, you know, and then it only perpetuates white folks' desire to be canceled. I actually think there's a desire to be told that we're wrong and we're doing it wrong, and to feel the shame of doing it wrong.
There's this masochism.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so how do we create culture that is more gentle and more open, and, you know, that leans towards one of the antidotes, which I'm not going to reveal yet.
Well, you know, I think it brings back our dinner conversation, actually, where we were talking about togetherness and being in conjunto. That what defensiveness does is cause further separation,
right,
and threaten togetherness.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because what white supremacy wants is for us to be hyper individualistic. Mm-hmm. Right? This is why we're so wedded to the market, is because the market tells us how to be. It tells us what to give. We become sacrificial lambs to the market. And it destroys community. So if we can actually be counter to the neoliberal market, which is what white supremacy does not want us to do. But if we can actually be a different kind of people with one another, we can actually build this togetherness.
Yeah.
Which would completely dismantle defensiveness.
Yes. Well, yeah. Or defensiveness that is
because togetherness requires the antidote that you're going to share. Right.
Before I do, I want to bring up another point on here. I think I can say it, but I want to read it correctly. So I think we already kind of talked about this, that there's a focus that's placed on protecting power instead of addressing harms. And to further that, I think that the way that they rephrase this, it's a similar way. It's a similar phrasing, but it's slightly different in that naming intention instead of acknowledging impact. I'm going to say that again. So defensiveness will have us focus on naming intention instead of acknowledging impact. So, for instance, let's think of a silly example. I wanted to, man, I wish I could think of a real life example. It's not coming to me, but I think that, so I've seen this play out a lot especially in the past 3 months. I've seen this play out a lot where,
well, let's take the Instagram post that we both saw last night, and we can about the Black Lives Matter.
Okay.
And it's intention over impact, right?
Yes.
The intention of the post was to say that there's something different about saying Black Lives versus supporting the Black Lives Matter organization. But the impact of that is actually disenfranchising BIPOC people and doing harm.
Right. And so, if somebody says, well, that wasn't my intention, what that does is it brings the attention back on me. So if I say that wasn't my intention, I didn't mean to do that. Like, this is what I intended. I'm bringing your focus back to me instead of saying, I've harmed you. That wasn't my intention, but I can see that I've harmed you. and I'm really sorry for this specific way that I have harmed you. And taking it a step further, if we were looking at reparative justice or restorative justice, what help do I need? What support do I need? And what support do you need if I've done harm to you, let's say, to move through this and move towards a transformation, right? Instead, it's, well, that wasn't my intention. And then that sort of gives folks a chance to just kind of cut it off right there. Conversation is over. It's about me.
Right.
It's not about you. And then you continue to be hurt.
Right.
And you continue to be harmed. And that is what I think we're seeing a lot of, or we especially were really in the first few weeks of the uprisings, the recent uprisings. I was seeing that in my own circle and in other, in just, on social media.
Well, and I have said on social media and elsewhere on podcasts that cancel culture is perpetuating the same kind of oppression that white supremacy is causing.
Say that again. Sorry.
That cancel culture is perpetuating the same kind of oppression that white supremacy is causing.
Yes.
That it's a tool of oppression, and we should be very, very concerned when anybody is canceled.
Yeah. So going back to Robyn DiAngelo, for instance, I think it is important for some transparency around what's happening with her finances, especially because that is such an important ingredient in all of this. And she is making
people of color don't have the same access to the all-American dollar. And the whole thing is that she's become rich off of peddling anti-racism on the backs of people of color. That's sort of the critique about this person.
And at the same time, she has wrapped language around things that white folks may not have had language for before. And that is really important work. And so how do we hold the paradox of her existence, and how do we hold her humanity without canceling her, without saying, you don't belong here, get out. And especially for those of you who are white, who are watching or listening, we can't afford to leave each other behind. Now, I'm not saying that means everybody's your best friend. Like, sometimes we have to put boundaries in place, and we have to love people from afar, or like love people from a really, really far distance, right? But all of that can exist, and there is room for all of that. There's room for all of that. And that is this. So defensiveness, it feeds into this sort of cancel culture, and almost this, like you were saying, masochistic need to be canceled, a need to go, well, they don't like me, so I'm just going to go back to my life over here, right? Which is then feeding into sort of this advantaged positionality of being white.
So I think we have a great question here that I want to...
Okay, Mom said not to lean forward.
Okay, that's right. But I have to lean forward because I can't read it.
My mom is so amazing. She watches every single one of these, and then she gives us feedback. She's a theater director, and a brilliant one at that. And she tells us things. So we're trying, y'all. We're really trying.
She's our technical director, and we're already failing.
Failing. I think I can read it from here.
Okay, you want to read
I'm going to try. I'm going to try to read it from not without leaning forward, but it's so hard. Okay. So we have a friend that's asking, is white supremacy a tool of neoliberalism, or neoliberalism a tool of white supremacy? What's the connection? Is it ambiguous? I'm going to toss that to you because I don't feel like I can really fully speak to neoliberalism.
Yeah, so these things are intertwined. Neoliberalism advances or accelerates white supremacy, and white supremacy fuels neoliberalism. These are two sides of the same coin. We live in, the market system here in the U.S. and largely globally is motivated by neoliberal economics.
What the heck is neoliberalism? Can you please explain that?
So we have to phrase it in terms of economics because it comes out of the economic system.
Okay.
Neoliberalism also informs subjectivity, like hyper-individualism.
Okay.
But we first have to go to the economics department to learn to learn about the moral value of ourselves. And why I say that is the economic department of universities, they actually hold the keys to the theologies that we actually don't talk about.
Like theologies around resources and money and
right.
yeah.
Right. And I've often said budgets are moral documents. Why? Because where our money goes, how we get our money matters.
Absolutely.
So is neoliberalism, this term that sort of emerged through Adam Smith and other people, is neoliberalism a tool of white supremacy, or is white supremacy a tool of neoliberalism? They are wedded together, and both of them are designed to create a type of logic that disenfranchises people from community and enfranchises people to serve the all-American dollar. Yeah,
okay. That helps. And I just want to point out, too, that if you're talking about it as being this hyper-individualist thing, that is one of the pillars of white supremacy that we will be talking about later on, in a different live stream, but that these things are all interconnected. So we are just choosing to focus on one to just open up a conversation, one at a time rather. But know that these things are always interlocking and interlacing, and that's actually where they get the power. It's like the net, the like invisible lines between these things and how they all feed each other. Is really important. So that's a good question. I think it's both and.
And I hope that answered your question, friend. We can talk more offline if you want. There's a phrase that Kimberly Crenshaw created, probably 2 decades ago, that is part of a legal theory, and that phrase is matrix of oppression. I've been thinking about this phrase, patrix of oppression, because patriarchy is a form of the ways in which oppression gets played out. And so when we're talking about defensiveness, we are also talking about forms of patriarchy and masculinity,
right,
that we internalize. Right.
And that goes back to this sort of phrase that was that is listed, actually is here somewhere, that essentially defensiveness is spending energy to keep the power structure the way it is. Mm-hmm. And we see that, we could just talk about our current president. There's a great example. Like, there's so much energy expended on keeping power the way it is that the country is literally falling apart. There's a pandemic that is killing and like ravaging the bodies of all of our citizens. And he is spending his energy on, and his, the administration in general is spending their energy on keeping power the way it is, instead of actually responding to the grievances, which there are many, and the concerns and the freaking death that is occurring, like, let alone the illness and all of the other economic aspects of this. And so this is a really dangerous thing. And I think so. This reminds me of Rob Bell said...
Can I first say hi to Science Mike? Mike McCarg is on and is
Hi,
listening.
Science Mike.
And let me just say, go listen to his podcast, listen to his live streams. Mike actually helped us get this setup going, the lights and the camera and everything.
Yes.
And so
big ups, thank you.
Shout out to Science Mike McCarg, who is generous with his time and taught me through texting how to get the kind of equipment we need to do these live streams and to actually build content to help people connect the dots. So I just want to say thank you, and thank you for your generosity, Science Mike. Thank you for being on, listening. I know that you are working to build a better world just like we are.
I have no idea what I was talking about. Do you?
Well, we were talking about defensiveness.
Well, I know, but there was something really specific I was saying, and now it's gone.
I don't remember because I said hi to Science
I
Mike.
know. This is what happens when you interrupt me. That's okay. Oh,
Yes.
I know.
Okay.
It was Rob Bell.
Yes, Rob Bell. Yes.
Oh, praise it. Okay, so Rob Bell, you know what? I have no idea which podcast this is. I don't even know if it's his words, or if he got this idea from someone else, but he said something along the lines of, when the center, let's just say the center of a body is weak and fragile, we must defend the edges. And what that conjures up for me imagistically is borders. We must have borders in place that serve as a defensive mechanism to surround a center that can't hold complexity and that can't hold paradox and it's just going to fall over. Yeah. And so there is something really at like a body level, if you think about it, that where we can feel into defensiveness. There's a very like edge oriented physicality. Like as I'm doing this, I know I'm moving in weird ways, but like I'm feeling the edges of my body protecting the center, right?
Well, what about gentrification? I think about gentrification.
Tell me more.
How white folks flee urban cities, urban centers, because of defensiveness. White folks are defensive
to hold on to their stuff.
But also they're defensive to bodies of culture.
Oh, I see. So white flight.
So they leave.
Okay.
Because they have to protect the edges. So they flee to the edges of the city to protect themselves. And then with gentrification happens when white folks move into cities, it's for economic reasons, right? Move into neighborhoods.
Right.
And then what they do is they drive up housing prices, which is a way of protecting themselves.
And driving out
exactly.
bodies of culture,
exactly.
to use Resma's term. Yeah. And you know what? It's really interesting because when you said they flee, and I said white flight, you know, fleeing is a trauma response. It's a trauma response. And sometimes the trauma responses we have come in when we don't actually need them, right? They're there because they helped us survive something. Right. They're there because we learned them to help us get through something, but they may not always actually have the right answer.
Right.
And so I hear in that a trauma of a white flight, and then also there can be, you know, a freeze. We won't get into all that right now, but so should we talk about, we spent a lot of time talking about this. Do we want to talk about antidotes, or do you have more to say about defensiveness? Do I have more to say about defensiveness? Do you all have questions? We'll give you a minute.
Well, I think the thing that I want to say is that I see this defensiveness all the time in students, especially white male students. When I am teaching a discourse that is unfamiliar to them, I see defensiveness.
Yeah.
Because it threatens the norm.
Yes. Well, it threatens their reality.
Yeah.
Their reality is crumbling.
And I just want to say that since I've been at Duke Divinity, the white male students that I've had have been open and have evolved, really.
Yeah.
And I've seen the defensiveness go down.
Yes.
And I don't know if it's because the moment that we're in or we really are in very scary times when it comes to democracy.
Yes.
So I don't know if the white male students that I've had are feeling that in a different way. So their defensiveness and their masculinity is evolving. I think also as a trans masculine person, engaging with white male students, it disarms their masculinity. in a certain way.
Yeah, sure.
And so it's been very interesting. But I just wanted to say that in the classroom, I've seen this, and I've also seen it evolve.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And well, maybe I'll save this for when we get to the antidote. I think I'm going to save it.
I just want to say, yes, Science Mike, white men are also conditioned to perform mastery at all times and at all costs. Absolutely. And that goes back to our perfectionism that we discussed a couple weeks ago. And again, all of these are intertwined. Defensiveness is wrapped up in perfectionism, and with all the other pillars. And really, what we learn when we go through these pillars is that it's created a cultural phenomenon that is harmful.
You know, and when you just said that, for some reason, that little connection makes me think about war.
Oh.
I mean, and how often do we go to war to defend our country, to defend our rights as American citizens? Yeah. You know, how often do we create a wake of harm and death and in the name of defending something, right? So there's something about that. And then, you know, like literally, how is that reinforced in like sports culture? Like there are entire huge salaries given to people who are just working on the defense of a sports team. And what is that? You know, I think it's important. Okay, here's another way to flip it. Like, I am not a body of culture or color, right? But I have incurred bodily harm. I've been assaulted. I've suffered, right, in certain ways. And so out of that, I have had to learn how to defend myself, right? And I appear a certain way. And so, you know, as somebody who's socialized as a feminine, I appear a certain way, and I'm dealing with the male gaze, right? I'm not trying to make this about me, but I am saying I can see the value in it. What I am seeing in my friends, my Black friends, is that they are having to learn at lightning speed how to defend themselves. And that, my friends, is worth defending. And some of them are having to take on some of the same tactics that white supremacy would have them take on, right? Like weaponizing and right, like this. So there's just, it's so complex when we really look at like who actually needs to be defended.
I'm wondering if we can go back to sports.
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
Because sports actually is a great metaphor for white supremacy. In the sense that every sport, hockey, football, basketball, tennis, lacrosse,
baseball,
I don't know, is they are all predicated on oppositional politics.
Yes.
On us against them.
Yep.
So defensiveness is bred into the political, the social practice of the sports.
And there's an offense and there's a defense.
And so, and you play both sides all the time. And so if we really want to dismantle white supremacy, we need to start in our living room on Sunday afternoons and begin to call out the white supremacy of things like sports.
Right.
We can talk about the economic stuff all day long. I mean, not only are sports deeply ingrained in capitalism, but they are deeply ingrained in white supremacy. And so when I see basketball players kneeling in the name of Black Lives Matter, that is a disruption to the culture.
Right. And to the sort of trope or norm of like, well, this is how the thing normally goes. Oh, but then these people are like calling us to see their humanity. Oh, wait, that doesn't compute. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Just want to say thank you to Elizabeth. I appreciate your comments. So I would like to move into, and y'all keep questions coming if you want. We're going to move into, if that's okay with you,
the antidotes.
Yeah. So I think that on this original document, there's a lot of of ways of describing this. And again, in case you haven't seen this document, and if you're just joining us, we're talking about Tima Okun and Kenneth Jones document that is characteristics of white supremacy culture that was published in 2001, and recently they've sort of like revised it, and this was really intended for organizations. So we're talking about this on lots of different levels. We're talking about this at a body level. We're talking about this at in an individual level, at a relational level, at a communal level, and then of course in organizations, like we know this shows up. And so one thing that I really love that they have revamped is one of the antidotes to defensiveness is vulnerability. And so I think it's really important to model the antidotes, to normalize them. Yeah. And so I won't ask you to do this if you don't feel comfortable, but I will say, just as a way to really be vulnerable in this, that I am not immune to being defensive. Like, in fact, I think I've gotten really defensive in my life around things that are not stable for me. And when I'm challenged on something, I try my best to be present, and I try to receive it, and I try to hear it, and to have, a larger zoomed out perspective. But let's just be real. Sometimes I can't do that. I'm not in the right space, or like it's beyond my mental capacity, is literally at a body level. Like I was listening to Resma Menachem today, and he said, your body doesn't give a shit about what your intellect knows. And I was like, woof. Yes. And what happens is this is a body level thing. Like when I get defensive, I feel it in my throat and my chest, and I start to advance and I can't breathe as much. I mean, this is like what happens pretty much with all of these. But like there's a sense of like hardening my edges. And to be vulnerable is to be soft and to yield and to soften into what's really true. What's the wound that's behind this that you are fighting so hard to protect, because it hurts when someone digs into it, and you don't want them to see it, So I guess I just wanted to name that vulnerability is not only an antidote, but like I want to model that. Like I am defensive. I still get defensive. Even in like, especially in the conversation around race, like, I think that I am in the stream of anti-racist work. And I'm trying to do my best. And sometimes I just don't. Like, sometimes I just can't. And sometimes I get defensive, about my shit.
Well, I think about this for myself as someone who self-identifies as a scholar and an academic, that I have been socialized to defend my ideas.
Yes. Right. Right.
And in doing that, I do harm when I defend my ideas, instead of, as you say, softening into a standpoint or a position to receive, to listen. And I love that. So after I finished my PhD in 2015, I moved to California and was on faculty in Berkeley and met a wonderful therapist who I still see. And my goal in therapy was to get into my body. I had spent so much time rationalizing and thinking that what I wanted was to have a relationship with my body in a meaningful way. And I'm so grateful for Kara, who there's no defending my ideas with Kara. There is only a softening and listening to my body.
That's right.
And I'm so grateful for the past 5 years that I've been working with Kara. And y'all, I'm still like in the very beginning and on the cusp of becoming embodied, even though I'm writing a book on becoming embodied with the help of Aaron. But the Academy is not only self-perpetuating elitism, it is an embodiment of white supremacy.
Right. Right. Let's let that sit for a second. I have something to say, but I'm gonna let that drop. There's something about softening, yielding, that I wanted to draw out. That you say in the Academy, and I am no stranger either. I have been through many different programs and, got this degree and that degree and this certification and whatnot, which are all tools of supremacy culture. Like, they are all tools to say you have suffered through this fucking thing and now you're valid because you have these letters behind your name, which really erases lived experience. And that is what, what really matters and what really counts, especially at a body level. But what comes to my mind as you're saying this is there's a practice that I have had the privilege of learning and getting to facilitate eventually and being a part of that's called authentic movement. And this practice emerged out of dance therapy. So it's sort of a mixture of like moving and dancing, and also dipping into your unconscious, really, like not even your subconscious, but your unconscious, and letting that emerge. And what is so beautiful about this practice to me is that it's all built around witnessing. So the premise is that maybe I'm moving and you're my partner. I'm moving and I'm witnessing myself just as much as you're witnessing me. And when we witness, there is a layer of judgment that is removed and we are just present for the experience. And so that came up for me when you were describing your relationship with Kara versus being, at your dissertation, like final event where
defense. It's called a defense.
Y'all, I almost fell off my ball. That it's called a fucking defense. Yeah. Oh my God. What if it were a dissertation witnessing?
Yeah.
What about that?
Yeah, that would
How
change
would
the
that
whole
change things? Yeah. We're just going to witness this beautiful work that you really have poured yourself into, and we don't want you to defend it. We just want to hear what you have to say and fucking affirm you. Yeah. Affirm you right where you are. And maybe offer you some feedback if you're open to it. Maybe some places where you could grow and be curious. Maybe some places where you're doing really really interesting work and we're compelled by it. And this is all just our fucking opinion. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, how would that change things if we were a culture
that would shift the whole culture of a PhD,
right? And of America.
Yeah. So our friend has asked us a question.
Oh, okay.
And our friend says it's okay to be defensive, right?
Yes.
Some things are worth defending.
So this is what I was getting into earlier when I started to talk about the difference of, so like, where is it okay to be defensive and where is it not, right? I think with all of these things, there is a context, there's sort of a continuum of like defensiveness to vulnerability. And there's the space around the continuum. And what the space around the continuum allows us to do is go, now is the right and timely place for me to be defensive. Right. Because there is something really at stake that's being attacked. Right. It's when it becomes a perpetual sort of reflex to keep the powers that be in place that it becomes problematic and becomes harmful.
Yeah.
And this is very different for people of color and BIPOC folks than it is for white folks. We, as white folks, like, we spend a lot of energy and time defending our shit.
Right.
Whereas BIPOC folks who are actually being harmed, yes,
Yeah.
you have got to defend yourself. And
Yeah.
I was talking about that earlier with some of my friends who are like really learning and leaning into like literally how do I physically defend myself. So I think this is like a really important question. And I think it needs to be contextualized, right? In every moment. Like this is not just a be all and end all.
Yeah, I appreciate the question, because when I think about defending ideas, or let's just go with what is alive right now, defending Black life.
Mm-hmm.
We live in a culture that extinguishes Black life,
Right.
annihilates Black life.
It tries. It doesn't work.
It doesn't defend Black life. So there are some things that are absolutely worth defending. What we're talking about here is a culture of defensiveness that actually separates or cuts relationship off, and that actually perpetuates harm. Not a type of defensiveness that raises up.
Right. Or that might come from being, like, if you're white, which is the only thing I can speak from because that's my experience, being a co-conspirator with a BIPOC person, just like that. Like, I'm willing to put my ass on the line and defend you. Yes, absolutely. Then defensiveness, great. But if I'm trying to defend myself because of something that I have done or not done, like, that's what needs examination.
And really, defensiveness comes up, and it's really great to think about it in relationship with vulnerability. If the only way we know how to be in relationship is to be defensive, to be oppositional, then we are not probably relating in a way that is stewarding,
flourishing,
togetherness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like,
it's going to end up being transactional.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's a great question.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. We're looking at another question, y'all.
Oh, yeah. A culture that denies the grievability of Black lives. Absolutely. You know what? I just had a 2-hour conversation with a white man, and, he reached out to me for a consultation, and I was talking about the deep societal and cultural pain that white people don't know how to be in relationship with.
Mm-hmm. Because it gets to be too much and they're out.
Right.
Because they can be out.
Right. And I think denying what is happening through canceling or shutting off or not telling the whole story, and we didn't get the whole story of George Floyd when it first happened.
No.
And so denying the grievability of Black lives is something, and I think white people get defensive about that.
Yeah.
That white people get so defensive about wanting to defend the cops because they're keeping the peace.
Mm-hmm. I got something to say. So, okay. And forgive me because I'm probably doing this some injustice, but I saw this incredible meme that really encapsulates this thing of a culture that denies the grievability of Black lives and insists, again, defensiveness brings the attention back to me as a white person, right? And this there was this meme or this comic, and it was a person who was on the ground and their knee was hurt and they were having trouble, right? It's like a cartoon character. They hurt their knee, they're on the ground and they're asking for help. And there's a person standing in front of them who is able-bodied and who is not harmed. And they're saying, help me with my knee, go get help, my knee. I might have hurt it really badly. And the person looks back at the person on the ground and says, what about my knee? What about my knee? What?
Yeah.
Go get help.
Yeah.
The person's hurting. Right. So it's like, that is how it like spirals back in on itself. Well, what about me? What about my life? What about, do I matter?
Which is so, I mean, it's just insidious in white culture.
Right.
The me.
And at the same time, what I think supremacy culture does to us as white people is it always dangles our worthiness right in front of us, right? It's dangling it right in front of us instead of continually reinforcing what we know to be true, that we are all worthy of love, of belonging, of safety, of connection, right? Of dignity. Like we are all worthy, but as white people, we are taught that we have to earn that. Right. It doesn't just come, right? And so then when somebody else's life is in question, we go, well, we're not secure in which means we have to defend it.
So
right?
we have a great question here about, at what point does defensiveness become counterintuitive?
What point does defensiveness become counterintuitive? I'm not sure I understand.
Yeah, I don't know that I understand, but I wonder if... I'd
love to hear more on that.
I wonder if the question is actually, at what point do white folks... harm themselves
by being defensive. Yeah.
Right. Because the idea of around defensiveness and whiteness is that they don't want to deal.
Right. And it's an excuse to not do the inner work, which is fucking hard. I mean, let's not lie. Like that's just not easy. But I think that when we lean into that too hard, we miss an opportunity to really connect with ourselves and therefore with others. That's it. Okay, great. So thanks, Leonard.
Great, Leonard. I hope I answered it. So we have a couple more questions here, and I want to address them because I think it's really what I love about doing these live events is that we can actually be in conversation with a lot of different people, and I love conversation. How does this view of examine defensiveness apply to the purpose of a dissertation defense? And another question is, it seems defending our work allows us to better understand our ideas and explain them to others. Absolutely. What I, as someone who has gone through a PhD process and as someone who is very proud to be a first-generation college graduate and first-generation graduate school graduate and the first person to earn a PhD, I'm very proud of that. What I want to say is that the academy is part of supremacy culture, and so when I talk about shifting, or when you actually talk about shifting a dissertation defense into a dissertation witness, it is shifting the relational culture, because in a dissertation defense, it's oppositional. You don't know if you're going to pass. Now, you should never defend your dissertation unless you will pass. But some people will put people up for a defense and not pass them to make a point. That is just elitism and supremacy culture. So I would love to see the academy move into the direction of witnessing. How do we witness our ideas? And absolutely, defending our work. I work in a field around philosophy, theology, and ethics, and it is absolutely important for me to be able to substantiate my ideas.
Right. Yes.
But we should be able to do that in a way that doesn't perpetuate a type of defensiveness that is ingrained in white supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that makes sense to our friend who asked that question.
I also, for some reason, just thought of this other idea outside of the academy where, in our country right now, like, I think that the scientific ideas and like scientific evidence, really, it's not even an idea, need to be defended. Like the fact that we here in Nashville, there was apparently a house party this past weekend where over 2,000 people rotated through this house. No one was wearing masks. And the cops, even though there's a mandate that says it doesn't matter where it is, if there's a gathering of over 25 people and people aren't wearing masks, that you can enforce that. And I think that and so you can imagine that in about 2 weeks, there's going to be another spike in COVID cases here in Nashville. And so I would say, yeah, we actually do need to defend the idea that wearing a mask is going to help your grandma and my grandma and everybody's grandma and shit, maybe just your neighbor or your father or your brother survive.
Well, and since we're talking about COVID,
we're going off, y'all.
We can see in this moment how defensive white folks are to wearing masks. And this is part of the culture of white supremacy, that what white supremacy does is it traps you to say that you are the authority. And there is no other authority than yourself. That is bad science, that is bad theology, that is bad anthropology. And so we're going to see an uptick in Tennessee and Davidson County. I'm very concerned about that. But for those of you who are paying attention to science and doing your best, know that those people who are not wearing a mask, that some of that orientation is rooted in defensiveness.
Absolutely. They're defending their right to not wear a mask, right, and to, if they don't feel aligned with it or whatever it is, right? And in fact, like, we know people who have lost family members. We know people who are grieving because they've lost family members because somebody did not want to wear a mask. Mm-hmm. That's like, and so this comes back to, again, defend Black life, defend life, defend life. Like, life is worth defending. And when defending then becomes a way of being, we've gotten too far. Mm-hmm. It's when is the right and timely place to defend? Yep. When is the right and timely place to be vulnerable? Because it's not always safe to be vulnerable, right? You don't want to be vulnerable with a stranger and maybe have your heart mangled, yeah, right? Like, by this person. So it's like, all of this really is about discernment. It's about context. It's about reading the room, reading yourself, listening to your gut. Like, these are all things that we need to practice. We have to learn to listen to ourselves and to listen to when the red flags come up. Wherever they do, your body usually tells you, mm-hmm, whether you listen or not. Yeah. It tells you, and then you let that lead. Yeah. So there's
there's a lot here. And we're going to keep going through these pillars of white supremacy. Yep. Next week, we'll talk about quantity over quality. And there's a lot to talk about there, especially in a culture that is oriented toward production.
Yeah, it's almost all about producing, production, measurable goals, mm-hmm, and really just working against everything that is telling you not to work to make it happen.
People criticize me all the time for not creating more content, and I'm like, look, I'm trying to take a siesta every day and like be very faithful in the small things. I'm not trying to produce just for production's sake. I want to produce something that is in line with my call and vocation. And so this will be a very interesting
Oh, I
conversation
can't
to
wait.
have.
I'm really looking forward to it.
Thank you all so much for being a part of tonight's live stream on defensiveness and the pillars of white supremacy. We're really glad that you were here.
Yes. So glad you were here. And if you want to, just keep commenting, give us feedback, let us know how this is landing, especially in your body, and what's going on for you. How is this unfolding in your own community? Like, what's resonating with you? What's hard for you? Yeah, we want to hear it.
So I just have to say before we get off that my beloved revolutionary Clinton Wright,
Clinton, hi Clinton,
just commented, and I want to read it because I think it's worth reading. Clinton says, "It seems that defense language is rooted in the rhetoric of stand your ground." Absolutely. This is especially true if defense isn't rooted in an analysis of race and class, with the system of racial capital clearly identified as the enemy. The system wants us to defend ourselves against one another. These defensiveness cause us to stand our ground against one another and not the real enemy keeping us down. Absolutely. And Clinton, I don't know if you heard some of the previous talk, but we were really clear that defensiveness is a kind of oppositional politic that actually doesn't invite intimacy or togetherness as a relational orientation. Mm-hmm. And so I think that defensiveness is very much part of the stand your ground, and which we know has killed countless black people and trans women and black trans women. And Aaron and I are going through these pillars of white supremacy to just open up the conversation around how can we shift culture. And so thank you, Clinton, for that comment.
Thank you so much. And it just brings up for me, we are together in this. We are together in this. You are me, I'm you.
All right, y'all, we're going to sign off, and we will look forward to your comments, and we'll be back at this next week.
Maybe. We're going to be places next week.
Yeah.
But maybe. We might do it. Never know.
Yeah. All right, y'all. Take good care.